So today we're going to be continuing on of hope, the message of faith. And last week you were able to hear the first part in this series. And this week we're going to continue on in the book of Genesis from chapters 37 all the way through 41. And we're going to hear this week about how Joseph had to have faith in God. So last week we focused on Joseph and Mary, the parents of Jesus Christ. This week, we're focusing on Joseph, the son of Jacob. So we are really happy to unpack this week, and let's just go ahead and dive right in. Originally, I did say that we're going to pick up from Genesis chapter 41, but I think what I'm going to do is read from Genesis chapter 43, and then we'll go ahead and talk about the rest of what's happening. Okay, so from Genesis 43, this is the second journey of Joseph's brothers back to Egypt. We're skipping ahead a little bit here. So let's go ahead and read what happens, and then we'll get into it, okay? So now the famine was still severe in the land. So when they had eaten all the grain they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back and buy us a little bit more food." But Judah said to him, "The man warned us solemnly, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother along with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go down, because the man said to us, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you.' Israel asked, 'Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling me the man that you were with had another brother?' They replied, 'The man questioned us closely about ourselves and our family. 'Is your father still living?' he asked us. 'Do you have another brother?' We simply answered his questions. 'How are we to know?' he would say. 'Bring your brother down here.' Then Judah said to Israel, his father, 'Send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die.'" Today, I want to go ahead and jump into this message, hope, the message of faith. This is really a wonderful message. I really love to hear this storyline because you get to really see about how someone else has to have faith in the Bible from a different circumstance, how they have to have hope in their circumstance and begin to really believe in God, that God would bring them out. They were a lot of times when, even in our own lives, when we have to believe through different strives, tribulations that we have, different challenges that we have in life, that God is going to bring us through. And it's not always an easy thing to believe in. It's not always easy to have hope in our circumstances, especially because some of us are going through things that are more challenging than others. Now, I'm not putting one thing above someone else, because everyone's challenge is different. Everyone has a different cross to bear. What you may be going through, I may not be able to go through. And what I'm going through, I may not tell you, because you may not be able to go through it. But we each have our own cross to bear, and we each have to have hope in God and knowing that he's going to bring us through. And I'm not saying it's easy. It can be a very challenging thing, especially if you are a new disciple, if you are a new Christian, and this is new to you, and maybe you haven't gone through a lot of things yet. Then this is going to be something that we're going to end up having to learn and get through together. But the good news is that everyone goes through hard times. And the good part about it is that if you have Jesus Christ in your life, that you can go to him in faith and knowing that he understands you and what you're going through. Now, right here, Joseph, in our story, if we pick back up to chapter 37 in Genesis, he was his father's pride. he was the child of his father's old age. So his father loved him dearly. And of course, his brothers knew it, and they were jealous. And I'm sure Joseph was not stupid. He knew it too. And I think when we're siblings, when we're young, that when we have spats with our siblings, if for those of us that have brothers and sisters, and a lot of times we may fight with one another. We even antagonize one another when we're younger. Sometimes when we're older, and I'm pretty sure that maybe Joseph was no different, but I'm just speculating. Joseph at this point was only 17 years old. He was a young man and attending to flocks of his father. His brothers were out doing the things that they were supposed to be doing. And Joseph was just a young man at this point. And he began to tell them and his father about a dream that he had about how there were sheep in the field and how his rose up to overtake the others and how they were larger and how the other sheep bowed down to his sheep. And they began to say, well, what is this? Are you saying that we and our family and our children, we're all going to just bow down to you, Joseph? And this increased their jealousy. They were already jealous over the father's love, how he treated him. And this even antagonized it. On top of that, his father, showing his love for him, gave him a special gift. He gave him a coat of many colors to kind of share that. I'm sure this did not help the relationship that he had with his brothers. So this is in the start of Joseph's dream and Joseph's journey. At this point, he has everything going for him. He doesn't have a whole lot that it tells right away that he really has to have hope for. But later on, when he goes out to see his brothers, they conspire against him and saying, hey, you know what? We're going to kill him. When they saw him coming from afar off in the field, he was coming up, bring them food, check up on them. And when they see him, they're like, oh, here comes this dreamer again. Oh, my goodness. This is the attitude. And honestly, at that age, I probably would have been the same way, not wanting to murder him, but the same way in the fact of my jealousy and saying, all right, here comes this guy again. All right, you're so much bigger than us. Oh, we're going to bow down to you. And I'm looking at it from their perspective. But Joseph had this dream. He knew it was from God. And so he had the beginning of his faith right there, and knowing that God was the instrument and over his life. Long story short, his brothers ended up putting him in a hole. They were going to kill him. And then they ended up selling him to some people that were coming along. Okay, I'm making the story very simple. He ended up being sold into slavery, ended up in Potiphar's house. Okay, in which case, as a slave, this is the beginning of his trials and tribulations. I don't know what it's like to be a slave. I don't know what it's like to be captive, not in this sense. But Joseph was taken away from his family, betrayed by his brothers, sold into captivity as a slave. And now he's serving. So now he has to begin his journey of hope. Hope in knowing that not only will God make his dreams come to fruition, but bring him out of the current situation that he's in. And that's hard to see because at this time, he's in the midst of slavery. During this time, Potiphar gives him possession and the head over everything he has except for his wife. And his wife, Potiphar's wife, decides that she wants Joseph and throws herself at him. But Joseph, being a just man of God, says, hey, how can I do this wickedness to a man who's given me possession over everything in his land? After he had found favor in Potiphar's house. So he had gone from being a slave in Potiphar's house to being favored by Potiphar and then being put over the land. But in the midst of that, to make a long story short, he was set up by Potiphar's wife. Potiphar believed that Joseph was doing this wickedness and threw him into a prison. Okay. Now here Joseph has to have faith again in knowing that God is going to bring him up. He had already started to developing his faith. God had started bringing him up, God bringing him up out of his situation, but here he is back in the circumstance yet again. Now here's the part where he has to have faith because he's in there for a number of years. Now this has been a long time. Some time has passed. And the people that were in this prison had a dream, and he said, hey, you know what? I can tell you this dream, not of myself, but of God. So when one of them had gotten out of prison, when they all had gotten out of prison, the story had gone according to the way Joseph had gotten it and received it from God. And then this person stood before the king over Egypt at the time. Now, they had forgotten all about Joseph because they promised that they were going to remember Joseph. Okay. But then after a long time, Pharaoh, in his time of trouble, had some troubling dreams, and all of his wise men and magicians couldn't figure it out. But then at the end, one of the people that were in prison with him remembered what was happening. The chief cupbearer remembered his time in the prison with Joseph and said, hey, you know what? I do remember there is someone that could interpret your dream for you. And he told him the story. So then they sent for Joseph. They bring Joseph out. Joseph tells Pharaoh all that he dreamed. And behold, it came to pass. And Joseph became favored by Pharaoh. Pharaoh had set him up over his possessions, everything that he had in Egypt, because he was wise enough. He had this wisdom from God to be able to spare the Pharaoh in Egypt from the things that were in his dream, this famine that was going to occur. There was like 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. And Joseph, through the gift of God, was able to circumvent this and spare Egypt and have plenty of food and things for the land. And through this, his own family would be able to partake in this as the story goes along. Now, here's where God had brought him out. Yeah. God showed Joseph all these years ago, as a young man, that he was going to be ruling over all these lands. Joseph had no idea what land he was going to be in, but he had faith in God and knowing that God would take care of him and God would bring it to fruition. And by Joseph listening to God, by being obedient to God, God blessed him in this action. So God showed us that not only he was able to do this, but he still allowed Joseph to go through these circumstances. Which brings me to my point number one, and that is, through our servitude of God and through our belief in God, God will still allow us to go through challenges. Point number one, God will still allow us to go through challenges. Point number two, God will bring you out of those challenges according to his word, because God is not he's not a liar. So we can count on God to be true to his word and bring us up out of the things that he promised that he would do. And point number three, we can have hope in Jesus Christ. After all, he is our Savior, our Counselor, our omnipotent one, our Creator. He became flesh for us, died on the cross for us, and rose again, that we could have salvation through him. This is the story of hope, the beginning of faith, and we were able to see that in Joseph's life in this story. And I'm hoping that you can take some part of this to be able to use it in your own life, to be able to say, I may be going through challenges, I may be going through some tribulations, but God is yet in the midst. He's there watching over us. And I know if he does it for someone else, that he can do it for me too. Stay tuned next week, with another encouraging word. Hopefully you're able to get something out of this message. Remember, we are posting each and every week. And tune in next week, because we're going to have a third part in this series of hope, the beginning of faith. Like us on Facebook. We're also on YouTube. We're bringing you weekly inspiring messages. Also, I just want to bring you up to speed. There is, I want you to pay attention and look at our website for upcoming news. We have different things and events that are happening in a town near you. So just stay tuned for that and look for weekly updates. If you want to partake and be able to help in the ministry, please, I just ask you to do one thing. Just subscribe to our channel and like our messages. And then that's all I ask. If you feel the need that you want to be able to give, we are doing a missions trip to South Africa coming up in February. There's a GoFundMe on the webpage. There's also ways to share. Feel free, look at that on the page and give as your heart desires, as you want to. You don't just feel free to if you want to. I'm not asking you, I'm not saying you have to, but if you want to, it's there. But stay tuned for us each and every week. We have great messages, and I'm looking forward to next week when I can bring you the third part in this series of Hope, the Beginning of Faith. We'll see you then.